persuaded them. Well, I said, I asked them if they could do anything about it, you see, and wrote to the N Street, and we said I'd like to buy it because we could use it, you see, and could we buy some land on the site to do it. And I used to ring them up every day. I said, well, how far have you got on this? But they said, well, not very far. But on the day, they announced that whoever bought whatever hangars, or 2 hangars, that they would be allowed to buy the land and buy green around the hangar, you see, access and everything, you see. The other people that bought the other big hangar was the Potato Marketing Board. So Potato Marketing Board and us got together and we had a joint purchase with a line between us, which was very good. I think we got 10 acres of land, which my brother was able to use part of the airfield to land an aircraft that he learned how to fly, and he used to do this pleasure flying, and he actually married a girl that was a pilot too. But that's so. But with this airfield full of grain, you know, and the children used to have birthday parties at the airfield for Paul and for Mary, and it was Paul's was August, so that would be harvest time. So a whole lot of kids would come down the airfield, and they're playing the piles of wheat that they. It was, I mean, it was quite harmless, but it was good entertainment for them, good fun. But that was on the airfield.
And I've heard Paul talk about an incident.
Oh, the one he wrote about.
Probably, I don't know, but he's about the grain.
Peas.
That's right.
Yeah, well, didn't he tell you he wrote a story, he won a competition, Daily Mail, Mirror, is it Daily Mail or Daily Mirror, children's writing competition.
Right.
He wrote about this, you see, and I managed to haul him out. It was a hop of damp peas that were being sucked out to be dried, you see, in the dryer, and he got in it, and it started pulling him down, you see, and the little boy said, Paul's in trouble up there, so I was there, I happened to go up the stairs and tried to pull him out. I couldn't pull him out, but then I tried again, and I managed to get him free, and that was it. Meantime, the chap in charge of the mill had turned off the peas that were going down, and I managed to get him out. And however, and when he got out, he said, well, lost my sandal.
So how old was Paul then?
About 8.
Oh right, okay. So you've shown me, this must have been older then, you showed me a picture of them coming back from the wash, I think, very muddy. What was that?
That was later on when they were sixth form. Sixth form was, yes, that's right. They used to wander out on the marsh, and it was, I mean, it was, as long as they didn't go out when the tide was coming in, because the tide would come up the creeks, and suddenly I've heard of people, wildflowers.
Oh yeah.
And they get stuck and they have to hold the gun above their head until the tide had gone out, because they didn't know where to go.
Yeah, all right.
So
and just wait for it to
can
subside.
Be dangerous, can be dangerous.
Right. So there's the 4 children all playing happily and business going well then, sounds like it?
Yes, we managed to move down to the airfield from the granaries that Sydney bought during the war, and it was, we moved everything really. And we managed to get managed to purchase a big dryer that did 10 tonnes an hour instead of 5 tonnes an hour, so we could have an intake of about 100 tonnes an hour. So it was you know, high capacity and needed, because a lot of the grain was damp when it was harvested. And,
so how did this work? So the local farmers would bring you the grain,
yeah.
and then you'd sell it on to.
Well, we'd store it, you see, with the hanger we were able to store thousands of tons of grain, you see, so we'd dry it and leave it in the heat and charge them storage and buy it from them when we want to, you see, but it was subject to, when it's dried it loses weight. So there'd be an estimated weight and the drying charge that they'd have to pay. And they'd be in store, and we'd just buy it from what tonnage there was.
Mm.
And it was bulk, it was loose, it wasn't in sacks or anything.
Yeah. And who were you selling it to?
Well, other merchants and flour millers, and also we became a future store, which means you sell units of 100 tonnes at a time.
So who did you sell the grain to?
Well, it depends what sort of grain. Peas we used to sell mostly to bachelors, or it used to go into the London, what they call London dry market in hundredweight bags. And
So these were dried peas, not frozen before the
no,
frozen?
they're dried. These were dried. We didn't deal in frozen peas, just anything that was dried peas. And there were two sorts of peas, blues and marifat. However, they mostly to bachelors or into the, as I said, into the dry market, and then we used to do seed peas too. However, and then sell those back to the farmers. But wheat would mostly go to either flour millers or it would go to feed merchants, depending on the quality of the wheat. But with being a future store, you deal in 100 tonnes at a time, and you get a lorries turn up for 100 tonnes at a time. You see, it had to be loaded quickly, which we were geared up to do. And so you sell it to farmers and some merchants sometimes, if they wanted to buy it, you'd sell it to them if the price was good enough, you see. And I never went to Mark Lane, but there was a merchant we worked with who did go, and
to where?
Mark Lane was the mecca, the corn merchants of the south.
Where was that? Where's Mark Lane?
London.
Right.
And there was the market in Liverpool, but it's too far for us to come really. And then barley we used to sell direct to the maltsters sometimes if the quality was good enough. But most of the barley we grew in Lincolnshire was feed barley, or feeding stuff. So it used to go to the feeding stuff merchants. We used to use a good deal ourselves because we did feeding stuff as well.
And you process that yourself then?
Yes. Yeah, we made pig meals and layers mash and things, and fattening bullock food, you see, and that's livestock food. So that's where all the corn went to.
Mm. So it sounds like it's quite a big operation. How many people were you employing then?
About 20.
20 people, right? All local people just working there, so reasonably
Yeah.
large employer.
We had 3 lorries delivering feeding subs and fetching corn, delivering corn to various places. We sell some of the wheat used to go to Kingsley to be shipped around the coast.
And did that take up all your time then, the business, or what other, did you have hobbies or activities that you did as well?
Well, not really. I used to be on the parish. I used to be a parish councillor.
All right.
I was chairman for 2 years and helped to set up the parish volunteer car service, which meant that people coming from London to retire and they got spare time and spare cars, and the council agreed to pay so much per mile, and we could get people not many taxis, get people taken to hospital, you see.
Right.
And one of the ministers came to open it. It was quite successful, and it's still running because it covered a wide area. And the parish councils used to run it. Used to have a village organiser and several volunteers who would take people to the hospitals or to specialist appointments. And it was good really, because they used to take them and bring them back, and they would pay so much, but the council would pay half. You see, so it was worthwhile.
Yeah, good public spirited service. That, yeah.
Yes. What else did I do?
You'd stopped playing tennis and rugby now?
Oh yes, something. Yeah.
Because how
I
you,
stopped playing rugby the day I got married. Really.
oh, you said that very precisely. Then.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
why?
yeah. Well, wasn't fair really to bring you dirty clothes home on Saturday afternoon, was it? Dirty rugby shorts.
Right. Where did you get married, by the way? You haven't mentioned that. Was it a big church wedding or?
Oh, well, yes, it was a church wedding at Northwall, West Village, right in Norfolk, near Downham Market.
Mm. A lot of people? Big reception?
No, not big. No, sort of. Well, father had a big family, so we had a representative from each family. So it was
Right.
quite a small wedding.
Yeah. And what's your dad doing now? You said before that you and your brother were mainly running the business. He was more on the parish council. What?
He was district council.
District council, sorry.
And retired. He used to be director and come to the meetings and lay down the law. But I mean, he was still very active.
Yeah. And did he play with the grandchildren?
Did he play with the grandchildren? He supported them and liked them, but he didn't play with them.
Right.
Didn't give them much attention at all.
Right.
But Peggy did. His wife did. They used to walk down the lane, and she'd been a teacher, so she was instructing them and teaching them all sorts of things.
And
As they came along, Paul was favoured first, and then Helen, and then Mary, and then Elizabeth. But when Elizabeth started going, Mary refused to go at all.
go where?
Go down to Peggy's.
Oh, I see.
She just wouldn't go.
Oh, really? When the children were younger, did they go to the same primary school that you went to?
Yes, no. They went to Long Sutton. I was in the Conservative Club, and somebody called Mr. Newton, who was a teacher that and I knew him very well. He said, "What you need to do is get your children to Long Sutton School with Mr. Dicker, because it's a good primary school, and that was 3 miles away." So Sylvia used to take the children to Long Sutton Primary School, where Mr. Dicker was head. You see, I knew Mr. Dicker. He was headmaster when I was at Sutton Bridge, but he moved to Long Sutton.
Oh, right. So he was your old headmaster?
Yes.
Right, now that's interesting.
Yeah. And he says, Mr. Newton says, he children there. And they all passed 11 plus and went to Spalding. Paul went to Spalding Boys Grammar School, and the girls went to Spalding Girls High School.
But this wasn't the same school that you'd gone to as a boarder?
Yes.
Oh, the same school, but they weren't boarders?
But it was, high school was separate, the girls were separate from the boys.
Yeah. Did they still have boarders there?
No.
So they stopped that, so they went on the train every day and back again?
They went on the bus every day.
Oh, on the bus.
Yeah.
And so what was Sylvia doing now then? The children were at school?
Well, she was gardening. She designed a herbaceous border and around a tennis court, which was very good. And she maintained that, and you know, when they all came home, they all came round, sat round a round table for tea, put the world to rights, which was good.
And what about music lessons? No, Leslie and you had music lessons. Did your children have music lessons?
Well, yes, somebody called Roger Dickinson used to come in and teach Mary the piano, and teach them all the piano, even Paul. But Mary is the only one that seemed to be musical. She got a lovely voice, and he trained a Rotary choir. Of course, I've joined Rotary. He trained a Rotary choir to sing as a concert. Yes, and I joined Rotary. I was asked to join. I was speaker finder for 4 years in Rotary.
Mm.
That's one of my extra things too. But I got fed up with it because it meant giving up Thursday midday meals, and it was interfering with the business. So after a few years I gave it up.
Mm. Mm. So then the children are now all at Spalding High School, grammar school.
Yes.
Moving on, what happened then?
Well, Paul did well at O levels, and did A-levels and got a place at UC to read medicine.
Right.
But he wanted a year off. He wanted a gap year. So we went to see Vera, who had helped him with his biology, because he took a correspondence course in biology. Of course, the master wasn't up to it really, I took him down to Vera's, and she did dissecting worms and all sorts of things, and she was marvellous really. And then when he had his year off, we asked Vera what she should do. She said, "Do you want to go around Europe, Paul, with a rucksack?" He said, "No." So on the way home, I said, "Well, I was in Australia. I know somebody. You go to. I'll pay for you to go to Australia, and you can get a job there and look around." You see, and he jumped at it. You see. And we saw him off. So when I saw him off, he flew to Australia, met Laura, and he got a job, first of all, he's told you this, I suppose, erecting sheep shearing sheds, but I think they ran out of nails or corrugated iron. And he got a job looking after a milking dairy herd at Coolop, just outside Perth, and did that for a year. And he saved up enough money, and he sent the fare back to me when he got enough money. And then he came back overland. Has he told you this?
No.
He came back overland through North Australia, through the islands, and through. And he got malaria in. What's the name of the place? Escapes me. He got malaria, and met somebody there, Dr. Flamank, who had been to UC. So he spent about 2 or 3 weeks getting both malaria and planning his route back with Mrs. Flamank. He came back through India, Nepal, and Afghanistan, Iran, Turkey, and caught the Orient Express from Turkey back to England.
Very adventurous.
So,
Very adventurous.
yes, he was.
Yeah. So, and were you in touch with him? Was he?
Well, he used to send letters as he was proceeding across these countries.
What was Sylvia like? Was she anxious about him, or?
No, we saw him off and thought, well, there's a part. She was a bit anxious. Well, so was I, really. But there were the communications that came from Australia were marvellous. The letters.
Yeah, because no mobile phones or internet or anything in those days. 1973, 74, that would be, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And then. What about your other children, Mary, Helen?
Well, Helen went to America.
Oh, to study, or?
No, just I think a gap year. And did various jobs and came back. I don't know so much about that. But then Sylvia died, you see, so Mary had just taken A-levels and not done very well. And then she took them again at Christmas. I was given a place at Bristol to read French with drama. But she picked the first year, and I think it's because she ought to have had a year off. And Elizabeth went to I thought it was not fair to have Elizabeth home alone because of the family. So I got a permission to go to a boarding school in North Lincolnshire to Louth, which was a mistake, really.
So you mentioned that Sylvia died.
Yes.
When was that?
She was a patient one, but I'll have to look at them. December the 17th, 1976.
So that must have been a shock.
It was, yes, it was.
What happened?
Well, she was depressed, and she just. I was fetching Mary, near Christmas. I was fetching Mary back from a job she was doing in King's Lynn, and we came back and she'd gone, vanished, and she put herself in the river.
Oh dear!
And it was months up. We didn't know what happened. But she was found by some biology students on the marsh. Her body was found. That was it.
horrendous shock for the
Terrible,
family.
shocking,
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it still brings tears to my
I'm
eyes.
sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Of course, she was so vivacious and so full of life.
Yeah. So what did the family do then with the loss of their
Well,
mum and not knowing where their mum was? And you didn't know where your wife was then for some time.
Paul was doing medicine. He was in the middle of his course, you see, but I mean, it was a great shock. And Helen was she was at Polytechnic in Newcastle, doing history, modern art and design. It was a terrible shock. And that Christmas, it was just unbearable. Really.
Yeah. So you didn't know where she was?
No,
at all? Just kind of, gosh.
I remember going once to Paddington Station. Vera had been. I was seeing Vera off, and I thought I saw Sylvia in the distance. You see, and I chased across the station, but you know, of course, no avail.
Yeah. Gosh. So that was a real tough time then for you.
Yes, it was very tough. Yeah.
And how did the family and you build yourself up again after that?
With difficulty.
Yeah. Did you throw yourself into work or?
Well, there was a time when the firm was going to learn what we could learn from the Germans about wheat growing. You see, just an ICI expedition for mostly our firm and some of our customers. I didn't want to go, but when the staff said, "Come on, we'll look after you," and I went. It was good. I did go. It helped to bring me back. Yeah, it was a tough time.
Yeah. So there was only you living at the home then that you designed for.
Yeah.
For how long was that then? How?
Oh, for several years.
Yeah.
I kept it. But then in the end, I think it's no good. I just said it. I lived in the after that I sold it and lived on the caravan on the airfield. A couple of caravans that were.
Right.
Yes, and that's where I lived. I shouldn't have sold it really, but you know, it was hard parting really.
Just tough memories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's full of memories. I suppose I couldn't live with memories. I stuck my furniture in a hanger, in a blister hanger that Leslie had, because he told you to go play on me.
So what was Sylvia like?
Well, she was attractive, very outgoing person, and she used to make friends very easily and very communicative. And I mean, if she went into the village sometimes, she'd meet somebody and bring them home, and they were usually very interesting people. And also, she became a JP, and then she used to clear up on Wednesday evenings to counsel drug addicts at Wisbech, which helped her with her being a JP, and lots of other things she used to get up to. She would run parties enthusiastically. Anything she did was with a lot of enthusiasm. And she became, at this high school, she became secretary of the association they have with the high school. I forget what they call it.
The parent teacher, something like that, was it?
Yeah, so,
PTA.
PTA, yes. Yeah. So I'm very interested in the girls' education and interest in life in general. It was stimulating to be with her, to say the least.
Was she a good cook?
Yes, but she started off. When we first married, she couldn't cook, but she went to cooking lessons, and soon became a very proficient cook. I wasn't allowed in the I was allowed in the kitchen. That's all. You just sit there and watch me, and I didn't do any cooking.
Right.
And I do now, but I didn't then.
Where did she get cookery lessons?
Well, when last year at the Leeds school where she was teaching, when she was when she was commuting to do teaching, she had evening classes in cooking then.
Ah, right, when you were at Holbridge.
That's right.
Yeah, right. So how long did you live in the caravan then?
Oh, a couple of years, I think, I'd guess. But it was, whilst I was there, I went out to see Paul in Papua New Guinea one Christmas. And
so he qualified by then?
he qualified. You see, he got a job doing BSO work in Papua New Guinea and near, near Port Moresby.
Mm.
And I went out to see him, and I went through via Karachi, India, and stopped in Delhi for a couple of days and went to the Taj Mahal and spent Christmas, spent New Year's Eve at a round table with a lot of Indian students, and it was lovely really. And then went on to Paul in Papua New Guinea. And when I got out of the aeroplane, I thought, well, it's the engines that are warm, but it was so warm there that it was just the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And Paul met me then to get to Paul, it was a twin-engine aeroplane, then a single-engine aeroplane until we reached Paul at Italy. That's the place, Italy. And they met me and put a garland around me for the Papua New Guineans, and then went off to stay with Paul. But he had we used to go evenings just to meet some of his friends, and the pilot that used to take them around was American. And since he was flying these single-engine Cessnas, but he's now a pilot flying the four-engine jumbos throughout the world, and he's been to see Paul since he's been, which is rather nice. And there was a Scottish nurse came out there, and Paul and he said, "We have to go and look up this nurse." And the American, he married her in there, and now she's living back in Scotland, and he's living in Scotland. However, that was an interesting one. But 2 years after I got back from Papua New Guinea, I got malaria. And they didn't know what it was, and I was sent into Kingsland Hospital, and I was in a separate ward because they didn't know what it was. But Paul said, "I know what you know what it is," because I used to speak to Paul in Papua New Guinea from the airfield quite regularly. And it was good reception, very good reception. And I got this malaria. But I remember when I had it, I was in the caravan, and you perspire, and your pyjamas get all wet, and I was putting them in the dryer, getting new ones out, so to get over this malaria. But they cleared it up by modern drugs.
So your father, you and Paul have all had malaria.
That's
which
right.
is quite unusual, I would have thought, in a family.
Yes.
But you said it recurred for your father quite a bit, but
Yes.
there's no after effects for you and Paul.
No, because of modern drugs, I think.
So how long were you in Papua New Guinea?
I was about three or 4 weeks. It's over Christmas, because I remember having, as I suggested before, a meal with these Indian doctors, and saw the Taj Mahal.
So who was running the business then?
Well, we got it sold before I went to Papua New Guinea. It was sold.
Oh right. So did you retire then?
Yes.
Right. That would be you retire at the age of 60.
Yes.
To enjoy your retirement.
Yes.
Yeah. So why did you retire at that age?
Well, because somebody offered to buy the business, you see, and Leslie said he'd rather get out of it, and really couldn't afford to buy him out, you see.
Mm.
So I accepted the fact that it was to be sold, because it might have been the right time to sell, because and I think in fact it was, because a lot of the smaller businesses were going, and we sold to a neighbouring business who Marsh and Wingler they were called, and they bought it at a price we agreed, but after about 2 years they went bankrupt, because they thought by spending money you could make money, but it wasn't quite like that. If they'd allowed me to be on the board, I think they'd have been better off, because I would have exercised caution, because they spent too much money on things.
Right.
Instead of and selected people that they employed were not right for the job. You know.
Right. And what was Muriel? Because you said Muriel had been associated.
Well, Muriel had been helping with the company before she married. She did seed testing. She did seed testing and did secretarial work. But she got married in 1965. She got married, and so did Leslie. They both got married in the same year. And she married a farmer, Gilbert.